November 29, 2024. A 15-year-old boy found his father in the most horrible situation after 4 days that he was declared missing. Follow me closely as we unravel the case of Jason Bloomfield. This is one of the most horrible true crime cases I have ever covered. Jason Bloomfield was 46, a Florida father who never pretended to be perfect but tried every day to be present. He worked, he planned, he showed up for his son. Friends called him steady. Family called him dependable. The kind of dependability that makes people trust you with house keys, with secrets, with the small promises that hold families together. He had a way of fixing things with his hands and smoothing storms with a joke. He wasn't supposed to be a headline. He wasn't supposed to be found like this. His last days didn't vanish into thin air. They were taken, inside the place where he was most unguarded, by the person who slept under the same roof and knew where the extra blankets were kept. But Jason hadn't disappeared. The week before, messages were still coming from his phone. They said he needed space. They said he'd gone out. They said not to worry. They sounded like the kind of words a man might use to soothe panic without giving details. Only the people closest to him noticed the tiny gaps, the wrong emoji, a phrase Jason didn't use, a sentence that ended where he would have continued. His mother reread them at night and told herself she was overthinking it. His son stared at the screen and wondered why his dad would text instead of call. Those doubts floated through the days like dust in sunlight, easy to miss if you didn't look straight at them. And while the doubts gathered, the house where Jason should have been alive filled with bleach and silence. Jason hadn't disappeared. Someone was living with his body for days. The line sounds like a rumor until you place it beside the little things that don't add up. A couch wedged against a bedroom door, a smear on a mop handle, a garbage bag full of rags that smell like a swimming pool gone wrong. Someone dragged him into that bedroom. Someone covered him with blankets and clothes. Not to keep him warm, but to keep him hidden. Someone tried to erase time with cleaning supplies and a locked door. And the most disturbing part isn't just the concealment, it's the ordinary rhythm that kept going around it, as if pretending hard enough could rewrite what had already happened. This is just the beginning of a case that will leave you speechless. But before we go deeper, I want to welcome you to the channel. If you care about real stories, the ones that deserve to be heard, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps more people find these stories. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next case we uncover. Now let's get into the heart of what happened that day. Venietta Lennon, a 37-year-old woman who was often seen by Jason's side at cookouts and quick grocery runs. Outwardly, nothing about her demanded a second glance. She could be polite when she wanted to be, camera-ready with a half smile and photos that now look like warnings in hindsight. But behind closed doors, the temperature ran hotter. Friends of friends remember Jason growing quiet when her name came up, the way a person does when they are weighing whether to speak or keep the peace. There were arguments that ended with slammed doors and apologies that felt too practiced, jealous questions asked twice, phone checks that were passed off as jokes. You know the slow creep of control when you see it. It doesn't arrive like thunder, it comes like humidity, making every breath a little heavier until you don't notice how hard you're working just to breathe. On the surface, the relationship moved forward. Shared meals, shared bills, shared photos, but the ground under it was soft. Jason wanted stability. He wanted to build something that would last longer than an argument. Venietta wanted certainty too, but of a different kind, the kind where nothing slipped out of her grasp. If a friend texted him late, she wanted to know who and why. If he stayed an extra hour at work, she wanted proof. In public, she could be warm. In private, she could be volcanic. People who loved Jason learned to read the weather and schedule conversations for clearer skies.
Jason Bloomfield's life was, in many ways, a portrait of the everyday man people take for granted until he's gone. He worked steady jobs. Nothing glamorous, but jobs that paid the bills and kept food on the table. He was the type of father who showed up at school events, the kind who would sit in the bleachers on a hot Florida afternoon just to watch his son play ball. even if it was only for a few minutes. His world revolved around his child, protective, present, and careful to build a bond strong enough to survive the storms of adolescence. Friends described him as dependable, a man who could be counted on to lend a hand, pick up the phone, or share a laugh at the right moment. But beneath that strength was a quieter longing. Jason wanted companionship. He wanted love. His life was full, but not complete. And that hunger for connection would ultimately become the very crack where danger seeped in. It was in that space between stability and longing that Van Anita Lennon entered. Their first meetings seemed ordinary, two adults finding one another at a stage of life where second chances mattered. At first, she presented herself as supportive, attentive, even nurturing. She laughed at his jokes, she praised his dedication as a father, and she leaned into the image of a woman who wanted to build something lasting. For a man like Jason, weary of loneliness but cautious about who he let close to his son, this seemed like the answer he'd been searching for. The kind of love story people root for. At least, that's how it began. But as months passed, the warmth carried shadows. Friends began to notice the subtle shifts. Jason would grow quiet when she entered the room, as though weighing each word to avoid friction. A cousin remembered an afternoon barbecue where Van Anita questioned Jason about a missed call in front of everyone, her tone sharp, her smile brittle. What seemed like playful teasing at first revealed itself as control, little intrusions into his privacy, sudden flashes of jealousy, questions that felt less like curiosity and more like interrogation. She wasn't asking because she cared. She was asking because she wanted control of the answer. Jason's protective nature became a double-edged sword. On one hand, he tried to shield his son from the tension by downplaying it. On the other hand, he convinced himself he could handle it. He could fix this relationship the same way he fixed broken appliances or loose floorboards. He believed that if he stayed steady, the storms would settle. But storms don't always settle. Sometimes they gather, quietly, until the pressure finds its release in ways no one imagines. And here lies the bitter irony. Jason wanted stability. He wanted a home filled with peace, laughter, and the kind of routine that gives a child safety. Anita, however, craved certainty of a different kind. She wanted ownership, to know where he was, who he spoke to, and why. When he gave her answers, she asked for proof. When he gave her trust, she responded with suspicion. The balance of love and control tilted further each month. And while friends tried to hint at what they saw, those sharp comments, those forced apologies, Jason brushed it aside. He wanted to believe in second chances more than he wanted to acknowledge the warning signs. The tragedy, of course, is that love, or what passes for it, can be a disguise. From the outside, Jason and Anita looked like a couple building a shared future. They lived together, they posed for photos, they played their parts. But behind the closed doors of that Florida home, the cracks widened and the foundation shook. Jason's mother once said she could hear weariness in her son's voice when he spoke about the relationship. But he always followed it with the same reassurance. "I'm handling it, Mom." He thought he was. He thought he had time. What no one could predict was how quickly a household argument could turn fatal. Words raised, tempers flared, and then silence, the kind of silence that isn't peace, but aftermath. Jason Bloomfield believed his love life was just another part of his journey, with bumps and reconciliations like everyone else's. What he didn't know was that the relationship he clung to for stability would be the very thing that ended his life. No one could have predicted that an argument inside Jason's home would lead to his final breath. Too many people trust the wrong person, just like Jason did. Don't scroll past this. Give this video a thumbs up right now. Share it to warn someone who might be in danger without even realizing it. And subscribe so you never miss another case that could save a life.
The night the evil happened seemed ordinary to those living nearby. Neighbors later recalled hearing muffled sounds in the distance, but in the quiet of the evening, they brushed it off, assuming it was nothing more than the noise of a television or perhaps someone moving furniture. No one could have imagined that what they heard were Jason's final moments. Inside the house, everything was far from ordinary. Jason was shot multiple times in the living room, his body collapsing where he once sat in comfort. The sound of gunfire was sharp, violent, and quick. But once the echoes faded, silence filled the air, broken only by the shallow breaths of the woman who had pulled the trigger. Vianita stood over Jason's lifeless body, her mind racing. The man who had trusted her, who had opened his home to her, was now lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Panic set in. She knew what she had done could never be undone, but instead of calling for help or admitting the truth, her thoughts turned to concealment. She grabbed his arms, straining with effort as she dragged his body across the floor. Every pull left smears of blood on the hardwood, marks she desperately tried not to look at. Inch by inch, she hauled Jason's body into the bedroom. Once inside, she covered him quickly, layering blankets and clothes over him, as though burying him beneath a false sense of normalcy. She wasn't satisfied with just hiding the body. She shoved a couch against the bedroom door, creating a crude barrier, as if the sight of furniture would be enough to erase what had taken place. But the truth lingered in the air, the metallic scent of blood, the dark stains on the floor, and the weight of silence. Still, she wasn't finished. Vianita fetched bleach, rags, and a mop, moving frantically as she tried to scrub away the evidence. She bent over the stains, her hands working feverishly, the harsh chemical smell filling the house. The harder she scrubbed, the clearer it became that no amount of bleach could wash away the crime she had committed. The floor still told the story, and the walls seemed to close in with each desperate swipe of the rag.
Vianita knew she had crossed a line that could never be undone, but instead of panic, she leaned into deception. As Jason's body lay hidden in the bedroom, she picked up his phone and began crafting a story. To his family and friends, Jason was suddenly texting like nothing had happened. The words were brief, vague, and unlike the way he normally spoke. But for Vianita, that was the point. She wanted people to think he had simply walked away. She sent messages claiming he needed space, that he was overwhelmed, that he just wanted to disappear for a while. At first, it almost worked. People wanted to believe Jason was alive. They wanted to cling to hope rather than face the darker possibility. But the cracks in her lies showed quickly. Jason's mother read one of the texts and said quietly, "That doesn't sound like him." His friends agreed. The phrasing was off, but tone was wrong. Something felt artificial. And then, Vianita took the deception even further. She got behind the wheel of Jason's car, withdrawing money from his account, as if he were still alive. She even posted cryptic messages on social media, hoping to create an illusion of movement and independence. But with every lie, she was only tightening the noose around her own neck. Now I want you to imagine this for a moment. You get a message from someone you love, someone you know better than anyone else. But as you read it, something feels off. The words are theirs, but not their voice. The rhythm is wrong. The soul behind the message is missing. Would you recognize it? Would you question it? Or would you cling to the comfort of thinking they were still out there, somewhere? The police would later confirm what Jason's family already feared. Those texts weren't his.
Every message had been fabricated by Vianita in a desperate attempt to erase suspicion. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because while the world thought Jason had walked away, his body was still inside the home, hidden beneath blankets and clothes, decomposing just feet away from the very phone she used to impersonate him. And there was a detail that made the deception even more disturbing. During the days that followed, neighbors recalled seeing Vianita leaving the house in different outfits, carrying bags of cleaning supplies, even laughing on the phone as if nothing had happened. Behind closed doors, she sprayed bleach across the floors, mopped repeatedly, and opened windows to mask the smell. But no matter what she did, the odor of death began to creep through the walls. Jason's sister called one evening, her voice trembling. She said, "This doesn't make sense. Jason doesn't write like this. Something is wrong." And for the first time, suspicion turned into certainty. They knew the man they loved hadn't simply vanished. Something terrible had happened. But here's the twist no one expected. In her frantic attempt to play both roles, the grieving partner and the vanished victim, she slipped. She sent a message that contradicted an earlier story. She claimed Jason was traveling, but at the very same time, she was caught on surveillance withdrawing money with his card. That inconsistency would plant the seed that finally unraveled her web of lies. And yet, as the days stretched on, Jason's body remained in the bedroom, covered, concealed, forgotten by no one but the woman who had put him there. Imagine living beside the body of someone you once loved. That kind of horror shouldn't go unnoticed. Give this video a thumbs up to keep Jason's memory alive. Share it so people see the truth of what happened behind closed doors. And subscribe, because these stories matter, even when the killers try to silence them.
Vianita didn't run. She didn't panic. Instead, she stayed. For days, she carried on inside the same home where Jason's lifeless body was left to rot. Imagine that for a moment. The man she once loved, now gone, and she went about life as if nothing had happened. The smell was the first sign, a thick, sickly odor that clung to the air, seeping into the carpets, the walls, even the curtains. Neighbors would later recall noticing something foul when they passed by. But Vianita? She lit candles, she sprayed air fresheners, she tried to mask the truth with artificial scents. And at night, she would lie down in the same bedroom where his body was decomposing, just feet away. She pulled the blankets over herself as if everything was normal. She closed her eyes in the silence while Jason's son grew increasingly worried. He hadn't heard from his father. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored. She didn't just kill him, she lived beside him as if nothing had happened. But how long could she keep up this facade? Jason's family grew restless. His mother called repeatedly. His siblings sent messages that went straight to voicemail. And every time they reached out, Vianita had an excuse. "Oh, Jason just needed space. He's been busy. He'll call soon." But something about her tone felt wrong. The family started whispering among themselves. "That doesn't sound like him. He wouldn't just disappear. He wouldn't abandon his son like this." And while Vianita kept spinning her web of lies, she carried on with eerie normalcy. But behind closed doors, reality was slipping. The house reeked of death. The curtains stayed drawn, shutting out the light. Friends who stopped by were quickly sent away with excuses. "Jason's not home. He is resting. It's not a good time." Can you imagine walking into someone's home, sensing something is terribly wrong, but being brushed off so convincingly that you start to doubt your own instincts? Meanwhile, the police were slowly piecing inconsistencies together. Jason's bank records showed withdrawals, but not in his usual pattern. Surveillance footage captured his car being driven, but Jason was nowhere in sight. Then came the detail that pushed suspicion higher.
Jason's son mentioned to relatives how strange the house had felt the last time he visited. He noticed the smell. He asked questions, but Venita brushed him off with a calm, "It's nothing, don't worry about it."
On November 29, 2024, Jason's family reached their breaking point. Days had passed with no contact, and his teenage son could no longer take the endless excuses. He convinced Jason's mother to go with him to the house, determined to find answers. The boy hoped, deep down, that maybe his father had simply been too tired or too sick to reach out. But when they arrived, something felt wrong immediately. The air outside seemed unnaturally still, as though the house itself was holding a secret too heavy to reveal. They knocked on the door, again and again. No response. The boy's heart pounded as he remembered all the times his father had opened that same door with a smile. Now it was silent. They tried calling his phone. It rang faintly inside, but nobody picked up. The mother's worry turned into panic. They decided to force their way in. The house was dark, and the smell hit them almost instantly. It was a stench that no candle or excuse could cover anymore. Jason's son covered his mouth, his eyes stinging, but something stronger than fear pulled him toward the bedroom. His grandmother begged him to wait, but he pushed open the door anyway. What he saw would haunt him forever. His father's body lying lifeless in a state no child should ever witness. The boy froze, his breath caught in his throat, his world shattering in a single instant. The silence of the room was broken only by his scream, a sound filled with grief, disbelief, and terror. His grandmother rushed in behind him, collapsing at the sight. Vianita returned to the house while the family was still inside. Instead of shock, instead of the raw grief you'd expect from a girlfriend who had just lost her boyfriend, witnesses described her behavior as bizarre. She paced, she wailed loudly, clutching at her face, but not a single tear fell. Police who arrived moments later would later say her crying was nothing more than an act, a desperate attempt to mask the truth. As officers began questioning her, her story shifted yet again. She spoke of arguments, of Jason leaving suddenly, of not knowing what happened. But the evidence told a different story. The smell, the body, the timeline of her lies, everything pointed to her. The boy, still trembling, told police he had been worried for days, but every time he called, Vianita said her father was fine. She told him Jason was just resting or busy or didn't want to be disturbed. That detail broke the officer's composure. To deceive a child while his father lay dead only feet away, it added another layer of cruelty to the crime. The arrest happened swiftly. Police pulled Vianita aside, cuffed her hands, and led her out of the home she had turned into a tomb. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering in disbelief. The woman they thought they knew, who smiled at them and waved in passing, was now accused of second-degree murder. But here's where another twist came in. Even as she was led into custody, Vianita kept her head high. She insisted she was innocent, that Jason had brought this upon himself, that no one understood what had happened behind closed doors. It wasn't the posture of a grieving friend. It was the defiance of someone convinced she could outsmart everyone, even when the truth lay rotting in the room she'd been sleeping in for weeks. Jason's family, meanwhile, was shattered. His mother clung to her grandson, both of them trembling in shock. For them, the discovery wasn't just the loss of Jason. It was the betrayal of realizing someone he loved, someone he trusted, had kept them in the dark while he lay dead. The teenage boy, in particular, carried the unbearable weight of being the one to find his father. That moment would scar him for life, a memory that no amount of time could erase. The police closed the scene with yellow tape, carrying Jason's body away as neighbors watched in stunned silence. The case that had been hidden behind excuses and lies was finally uncovered. But as Vianita sat in the back of the police car, stone-faced and unbroken, one question lingered in the minds of everyone who saw her. Was this a woman consumed by rage and guilt, or someone who never felt remorse to begin with?
The courtroom was silent when Vianita Bloomfield appeared for the first time in shackles. Her face showed no remorse, no visible grief. She stood before the judge and entered a plea of not guilty. Despite the evidence, despite the horror of what had been found in that house, she tried to convince the world that she had done nothing wrong. The judge, unmoved by her performance, denied her bond. Vianita was ordered to remain behind bars while awaiting trial. For Jason's family, this decision brought some relief, but no comfort, because no court ruling could ever give Jason back to them. For Jason's son, the trauma was unbearable. At just 15 years old, he had stumbled upon a scene no child should ever witness. His father's lifeless body left to decompose in a locked bedroom, while the woman who should have cared for him lived as if nothing had happened. That moment would haunt him for the rest of his life. His childhood was over in an instant. Jason's mother, shattered by the loss of her son, stood by her grandson, trying to piece together a future from the ashes of tragedy. Every memory of Jason, his laughter, his kindness, the way he cared for his family, now lived side by side with the brutal image of how his life was stolen. Jason Bloomfield's story is one of trust betrayed and innocence lost. His life was taken not by a stranger, but by the woman he loved. His son will carry scars that no court verdict can erase, and his family will forever wonder why. If Jason's story moved you, share it so his memory is never forgotten. Like this video, subscribe, and help us continue bringing these stories to light. When someone can live beside the body of the person they killed, what does that say about the darkness some people carry inside? Share your thoughts below. Thank you for watching, and see you in my next video.